There is one thing that keeps the people who own professional sports franchises up at night, and it has nothing to do with losing streaks or torn ligaments or bad draft picks. It is the moment a generational talent looks around at the organization that is supposed to be built around her, takes a long, honest inventory of what she sees, and quietly, calmly decides that she holds more power than anyone in that building ever bothered to acknowledge. That moment is not announced with a press conference or a dramatic locker room confrontation. It arrives in a podcast interview, in a casual conversation between teammates, in a single sentence that lands like a grenade in a boardroom full of people who thought they were untouchable. That moment arrived for the Indiana Fever last week, and the people running that franchise are only beginning to understand what it means for their financial future. Before we get into the specifics, we need to understand the broader context because this story doesn't start with a podcast clip. It starts with a pattern, a long, well-documented pattern of organizational decisions that, taken individually, might look like bad judgment or misplaced priorities, but taken together paint a picture of a front office that has been systematically mishandling the most valuable asset in the history of women's professional basketball. LeBron James did something fascinating during his second chapter in Cleveland. He didn't sign a long-term deal. He signed one-year contracts, deliberately, methodically, year after year, keeping the Cavaliers organization in a permanent state of uncertainty and forcing the front office to prove itself worthy of his continued presence every single season. It was a masterclass in leverage. It was the move of someone who understood that in professional sports, the player with the most commercial value holds infinitely more power than any title or organizational chart suggests, provided that player is willing to use it. A 24-year-old point guard from West Des Moines, Iowa, is now running the exact same play. And she is executing it with a precision that should terrify everyone in the Indiana Fever front office, from the coaching staff all the way up to the ownership suite. The podcast was called Post Moves. It is hosted by Caitlin Clark's teammate Aaliyah Boston and WNBA legend Candace Parker, and the conversation was relaxed, warm, and comfortable in the way that these kinds of informal interview settings tend to be. They were talking about the pressures of professional basketball, the demands of the spotlight, the grind of a long season. And then the conversation shifted toward the future, toward contracts and extensions and long-term commitments, the kind of territory that franchise executives pay very close attention to whenever their most important players are speaking publicly. Aaliyah Boston went first. She talked about her own extension with genuine enthusiasm and happiness, the kind of uncomplicated joy that comes from feeling secure and valued in your professional home. She told the audience she was locked in with Indiana through 2029. And then she turned to Clark with a smile and said something that was clearly intended to be the easy part of the conversation, the moment where her teammate would match her energy, affirm the partnership, and give the marketing department the soundbite they had been waiting for all season. She said, "Fever till 2029, I love playing with you." It was a perfect setup. The kind of question that writes its own answer if the person on the other end is playing along with the script. Caitlin Clark was not playing along with any script. What she said instead was so understated, so carefully constructed in its simplicity, that the full weight of it takes a moment to fully register. She looked at Boston and said she was only signed through next year. She said they would figure the rest out, unless she signed her epic. That's it. No pledge of loyalty. No declaration of love for Indianapolis. No hint of the enthusiastic commitment the organization desperately needed from her in that moment. Just a calm, measured acknowledgement that her future was undecided, paired with a specific contractual reference that tells anyone paying close attention exactly what kind of calculation she is making. The epic is the Supermax extension available under the WNBA collective bargaining agreement to rookie deal players who achieve all WNBA status. It is generational money by the standards of the league. It is the kind of contract that represents financial security on a scale that most professional athletes never experience, and it is the kind of contract that organizations like the Indiana Fever desperately, urgently need their franchise cornerstone to sign, so they can build operational and financial plans around her continued presence. Under normal circumstances, a player of Clark's stature signs that extension without hesitation. Under normal circumstances, the paperwork is completed quietly and quickly, The announcement is made with photographs and celebrations, and the franchise breathes a collective sigh of relief. These are not normal circumstances. And Clark's refusal to commit, delivered not with anger or drama but with a calm matter-of-fact shrug that somehow made it even more unsettling, is the most powerful single statement anyone has made in women's professional basketball this year. To understand why she is doing this, you have to understand what she has been dealing with inside that organization. Because the podcast clip doesn't exist in isolation. It is the output of an environment that has been building toward this kind of reckoning for a long time. There is the footage of head coach Stephanie White grabbing Clark by the arm on the sideline during a game, a gesture that, regardless of intent, communicates something very specific about the dynamic between a coach and her most important player. There are the repeated public statements from White about wanting to run the offense through other players, about building the system around post-up play and half-court sets, strategic choices that in any objective basketball analysis represent a decision to de-emphasize the greatest playmaker on the roster. There are the promotional materials, the billboards and the flyers and the digital graphics, where Clark's image has been systematically reduced or sidelined in favor of bench players whose statistical contributions to the franchise do not begin to approach hers. There is the broader culture inside the organization, the documented sense that Clark's extraordinary popularity is viewed not as a resource to celebrate and build around, but as a threat to an established hierarchy that predates her arrival and resents the disruption her presence created. An organization that genuinely valued its franchise cornerstone would not produce any of these things. And Clark, surrounded by capable legal and financial advisors who understand exactly what leverage looks like in a professional sports context, has clearly done the math. She knows that signing the Epic right now, in the middle of an environment this dysfunctional, would be the single worst professional decision she could make. It would lock her into this franchise through 2029, committing the prime years of her career to an organization that has demonstrated repeatedly and publicly that it does not know how to deploy her properly, market her honestly, or create the conditions that allow a generational talent to reach her ceiling. So she is not signing it. Not yet. Not until the people who need to make changes actually make them. And the financial reality of what that decision means for the Indiana Fever is where this story becomes genuinely devastating for the organization. Let's talk about what the attendance numbers actually show, because the data that has been circulating in the analytics community tells a story that no amount of organizational spin can soften. 1 year ago, the Indiana Fever were the most commercially significant franchise in the history of the WNBA. Clark's rookie season transformed the league in ways that had never been seen before. Gainbridge Fieldhouse was selling out. Road games were being moved to NBA arenas with 20,000 seats and selling those out too. Secondary market prices for Fever tickets were reaching numbers that would have seemed like satire if someone had predicted them before the season. The television deal the league signed in that environment was worth billions of dollars, a number that reflects what the entire league became because of what one player in one city was doing to demand for women's professional basketball. The rising tide analogy does not fully capture it. Clark didn't just lift the boats around her. She built the ocean. And now the Indiana Fever are sitting in 5th place in league attendance. 5th. A brand new expansion franchise in Golden State is selling out. The New York Liberty are doing exactly what you would expect a well-run organization in the largest media market in the country to do with proper investment and smart leadership. The Atlanta Dream, playing in a smaller venue, are packing their building. The Las Vegas Aces remain one of the league's model franchises for consistent sellout attendance. And the team with Caitlin Clark on its roster, the team that benefited more than any other organization in the history of the sport from a single player's commercial draw, is watching thousands of empty blue seats greet their players every home game. The question of how you go from a global phenomenon to 5th place in under 2 years does not have a complicated answer, even though the people responsible for it would very much like everyone to believe it does. The fans did not abandon Caitlin Clark. The fans made a deliberate, organized, financially consequential decision to withdraw their support from an organization they believe has been disrespecting her. That distinction matters enormously because it means the attendance problem is not a market correction or a natural cooling of early excitement or anything else that fixes itself over time without organizational change. It is a direct response to specific decisions made by specific people inside the Indiana Fever front office. And the fans have been remarkably consistent in communicating exactly what they want in exchange for their return. Fire Stephanie White. Build the team around Clark. Market your superstar like the global phenomenon she actually is, instead of plastering role players across your promotional materials while your most important player is treated like an afterthought. The front office's response to this feedback has been, to put it charitably, creative. Because rather than making the personnel decisions that would address the underlying problem, they have redirected their energy toward an increasingly desperate series of promotional stunts designed to manufacture attendance through sheer gimmickry. There are reports of free food giveaways at the door. There are bundled ticket packages combining entry with free snacks, the kind of offer you associate with minor league baseball teams trying to generate a family night crowd on a Tuesday in July. And then there is the detail that has circulated widely enough to become something of a symbol for this entire situation. Free oil changes. A professional WNBA franchise, home to the most marketable basketball player on the planet, is apparently partnering with local automotive service providers to offer complimentary oil changes as an attendance incentive. There are also reports of raffle prizes that include home appliances and household goods. The specifics are almost secondary to what the overall pattern communicates, which is that the people running this organization would rather spend their energy on creative promotions that temporarily inflate attendance numbers for a television broadcast than on the harder, more consequential work of fixing the actual problem. And the actual problem is organizational. It is a head coach whose tactical philosophy is poorly suited to the talent she has been given, whose public statements have repeatedly communicated a preference for running the offense through players who are not Caitlin Clark, and whose relationship with the franchise's most important player appears, based on available public evidence, to be fundamentally broken. It is a front office whose marketing decisions have consistently prioritized collective branding over the individual superstar draw that is, by the market's own clear and repeated verdict, the only thing this franchise has ever been worth paying to watch. It is a culture that viewed Clark's arrival not as the transformative gift it objectively was, but as a complication to be managed, a disruption to a hierarchy that was comfortable with its own mediocrity before she showed up and made everyone around her famous. Clark understands all of this. More importantly, her advisors understand all of this, and they have clearly counseled her on exactly what her contractual position means in the current environment. As long as that epic contract isn't signed, she retains complete and total leverage over the franchise's future. There are 11 other organizations in this league, and the expansion pipeline continues to grow. Every single one of those franchises would restructure their entire operation for the chance to build around a player of Clark's caliber. The Toronto expansion franchise is entering the league with a blank slate, international backing, and a desperate need for a face of the franchise. The Golden State Valkyries have built their identity around the kind of spacing and perimeter creation that suits Clark's game perfectly. The options available to her as a free agent, if she chooses to walk away from Indiana, are not theoretical. They are real, they are numerous, and every one of them represents an improvement over her current situation. This is the information the Simon family ownership group needs to internalize right now, because the window for proactive intervention is not staying open indefinitely. Every week that passes with Stephanie White still coaching this team, every home game played in a half-empty arena, every missed marketing opportunity, every public statement from the coaching staff that subtly communicates a preference for a different offensive identity than the one Clark provides. All of it adds to a documented record of organizational dysfunction that makes the decision to stay in Indiana look less rational for Clark and her team. The ownership group is not a passive party in this situation. They have the authority to make the changes that would meaningfully address the problem. A coaching change is within their power. A restructuring of the front office, the people responsible for the marketing decisions and the promotional strategies and the organizational culture that Clark is navigating every day is within their power. The decision about whether to create an environment where she would genuinely want to commit her long-term future is entirely within their